Captain Elena Ramirez was no stranger to the sky. From the moment she had first sat in a cockpit, the roar of jet engines had felt like home. But today, flying a massive C-17 Globemaster III cargo plane across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, she was a far cry from the fast-paced world of fighter jets and dogfights. Cargo pilots rarely made headlines. Their missions were mostly quiet, logistical, routine. This flight was no different, or so it seemed. The sun rose gently over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the sprawling clouds below. The interior of the aircraft hummed with life, the steady thrum of engines, the soft click of instruments, and the casual chatter of the crew. Elena sat at the controls, her hands resting lightly on the yoke, eyes scanning the instruments with practiced precision. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Chun, flipped switches and monitored the systems beside her. In the back, the loadmaster went over the manifest and checked on the cargo secured tight in the belly of the plane. Elena felt the familiar calm that only came when flying something she trusted. The C-17 was a behemoth, capable of hauling massive amounts of equipment or troops, but in her hands, it felt as nimble as a hawk. Flying was more than a job for her. It was a calling, a way of life. Despite her years of experience, Elena wasn't a household name. In the military hierarchy, cargo pilots often operated behind the scenes. Fighter pilots got the glory and the headlines. Elena knew that. But she was proud of what she did. She helped move supplies, humanitarian aid, and vital equipment, sometimes into the most dangerous zones on Earth. She was part of the backbone of America's military reach. On this flight, the destination was Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, an important hub in the Pacific. The mission was straightforward: deliver supplies to support ongoing operations and rotations. The skies were mostly clear, and the flight plan was routine. But as the hours passed, and the C-17 cut through the stratosphere, Elena's sharp eyes caught something odd on radar. A blip. Distant but moving, and oddly unresponsive to attempts at communication. "Marcus, do you see that?" she asked quietly, pointing at the screen. He leaned over and squinted. Could be a commercial flight? Maybe a private jet off course? Elena frowned. No transponder signal. No call sign. No radio chatter. That was unusual. Civilian and military aircraft were required to broadcast their identity. Silence meant one of two things. Either this was a rogue aircraft, or someone was deliberately hiding their presence. "Let's keep an eye on it," she said, tightening her grip slightly. The crew carried on with their duties, but the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. Elena's mind raced through scenarios: technical malfunction, navigation error, or something more sinister. The loadmaster's voice broke the calm over the intercom. "Captain, there's interference with the transponder. It's flickering, looks like it's being jammed or spoofed." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Electronic interference was no joke. It could mean hostile intent. She switched to the emergency frequency, calling base for a status update. But the response was static, broken, and faint. Communications were deteriorating rapidly. The mysterious blip was closing in. Elena felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't routine anymore. She scanned the cockpit instruments, double-checked flight controls, and issued calm commands to the crew. "Everyone stay alert. We're experiencing some electronic interference. I want all eyes on the skies." Her co-pilot tapped a few keys, trying to reroute communication channels. But the interference followed them like a shadow. Out the window, the endless blue sky stretched, but somewhere beyond the clouds, something was lurking. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. This was no ordinary cargo flight. Her crew was counting on her to navigate a threat they hadn't prepared for. Minutes felt like hours as the unknown craft continued its silent approach. Suddenly, the loadmaster whispered urgently, "Captain, I see it visually. Off the left wing, no markings, no lights." Elena's eyes narrowed, her jaw set. She reached for the radio again, broadcasting on all channels. "This is Shadow Vixen. We are experiencing unidentified aircraft proximity. Request immediate support." Her call sign, Shadow Vixen, was a nod to her early days in joint training exercises, a name that symbolized stealth and resilience. Today, it was all she had to reach help. Silence answered her. The unknown aircraft lingered, circling like a predator, testing boundaries. Alana's mind raced for options. Could she outmaneuver it? Could she keep the crew safe until backup arrived? Her hands tightened on the controls. This was the moment that defined her, not as a cargo pilot, but as a protector in the sky. And far away, in a military command center, her Mayday call would soon trigger a response that no one saw coming. The silence in the cockpit was heavy, a strange, unnatural quiet that amplified every small sound. The soft hum of the engines, the faint tapping of switches, the occasional crackle over the radio. Captain Elena Ramirez sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on the radar screen, watching the mysterious blip inch closer with every passing minute. She knew the skies weren't always safe, especially in contested airspace, but what she saw now was unprecedented. The unknown aircraft was shadowing them with a precision that suggested experience and intent. Its lack of identification was alarming enough, but the electronic interference, the flickering transponder, and the distorted radio signals made it clear this was no accident. "Loadmaster, report," Elena said calmly, though the tightness in her throat betrayed her nerves. "Captain," came the voice through the intercom, "the transponder is malfunctioning. No worse. It's being actively jammed. Whoever's out there is trying to hide their presence. And hour comes. They're breaking up." Elena felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Jamming was a tactic used by adversaries to disable communication and tracking systems, often a prelude to hostile engagement. She glanced at Marcus Chun, who was busily trying to stabilize their radio channels. "Keep trying all frequencies," she ordered. "We need to get through to command." Outside the cockpit window, the sunlight glinted off the wing's sleek surface. The endless blue sky seemed peaceful, but Elena's eyes searched for the shadow that lurked nearby. It was an invisible threat, one that could strike before they even knew what hit them. Marcus finally caught a faint signal on a secure channel. Static, whispers, then a crackled voice. "Shadow Vixen? This is command. We're picking up your distress call. Hold your position. Support is en route." Elena's heart leapt. Relief flooded her. They weren't alone. But she quickly pushed it aside. There was still a dangerous unknown closing in fast. "We're being followed by an unidentified aircraft," she replied, steadying her voice. "No markings, no response to hails, and our transponder is jammed. It's aggressive." The comms fizzled again, then died. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, pounding the radio controls. Elena took a deep breath. She knew the C-17 wasn't built for combat. It was a lumbering giant of a plane, designed to haul cargo and personnel, not engage in dogfights. They were vulnerable, sitting ducks in the sky. Her mind raced through options. Could they evade? Could they outrun a fighter jet? Probably not. The unknown aircraft was faster and more maneuverable. "We need to stay calm," Elena said, trying to calm the growing tension in the cockpit. "Fly steady. Keep the cargo secure. We'll get through this." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. This flight was no longer routine. It had become a life-or-death situation. In the cargo hold, the crew tightened their grips on their seats, whispering prayers and reassuring each other. Some began mentally preparing for an emergency landing, a terrifying prospect in these remote skies. Elena's thoughts flickered to her family, her parents, who had supported her dream of flying since she was a child. Her younger brother, who wanted to follow in her footsteps. Her friends who thought she was just a quiet, competent pilot. They had no idea what she was facing now. Outside, the unknown craft continued to shadow them silently, maintaining a precise distance, neither attacking nor retreating. It was as if it was sizing them up, testing their reactions. Suddenly, the loadmaster's voice broke through again, tense and urgent. "Captain, I'm seeing unusual energy readings from the aircraft. Electronic signals I don't recognize. This isn't a standard military jet." Elena frowned. What could it be? A foreign spy plane? An advanced drone? Or something else entirely? "Marcus, do you still have comms?" Marcus shook his head grimly. "Almost dead. We're running on backup power. Might lose all contact soon." The weight of the situation pressed down on Elena. She realized they might soon be completely isolated, invisible and vulnerable. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Panic was the enemy. Focus was survival. She opened the mic and sent another message on an emergency open frequency. "This is Shadow Vixen. We are being tracked and jammed by an unknown aircraft. Request immediate air support. Position, 30,000 feet. Coordinates redacted. Repeat, immediate support needed." There was a long pause. Then static. Then a response. "Copy, Shadow Vixen. Support inbound. Hold tight." That voice was steady, confident, a lifeline in the chaos. Elena gripped the controls, determined to keep her crew safe until help arrived. She glanced at the cargo bay, imagining the fragile supplies and personnel depending on her steadiness. Minutes dragged on. The unknown aircraft remained close, its silent presence a constant threat. Elena knew that any misstep could provoke an attack. She kept her movements measured, avoiding sudden changes in altitude or speed. The C-17 wasn't designed for evasive maneuvers, but Elena used every trick she knew to keep the plane unpredictable. Her co-pilot offered quiet support, running diagnostics and monitoring fuel. Suddenly, the loadmaster reported visual contact again. "Captain, the aircraft is attempting to match our altitude. I can see no markings, no insignia, no flags. Just a sleek, gray silhouette." Elena's stomach clenched. An unidentified aircraft operating with stealth and aggression over international airspace was a serious violation and a threat. "Is it armed?" Marcus asked quietly. "I can't tell," the loadmaster replied. "But its posture is definitely hostile." Elena knew that if this was a foreign craft, they were conducting a test, probing U.S. defenses, looking for weaknesses. The implications were chilling. If they succeeded here, what would be next? She looked to her co-pilot, then to her crew. Their eyes were wide with worry, but they trusted her. "Stay calm," Elena said firmly. "We're going to make it through this." Her voice was a lifeline, not just to the crew, but to herself. Up ahead, a flicker on the radar caught her attention. Reinforcements, fast-moving jets closing in. Elena's heart pounded. The F-22 Raptors were on their way. She sent a quick update. "Support inbound. Prepare for intercept." The unknown aircraft suddenly changed course, accelerating sharply, as if realizing it was about to be confronted. Elena stayed steady, her mind racing to anticipate the next move. The skies were about to become a battleground, and she was at the center of it all. As the seconds ticked by, Elena's thoughts hardened into resolve. This was no longer just a cargo flight. It was a fight for survival. And the first shot had already been fired. The cockpit was tense with quiet urgency. Captain Elena Ramirez's hands gripped the yoke tightly as she fought to keep the C-17 steady in the sky. The unknown aircraft still hovered near, its intentions unreadable but undeniably hostile. Electronic jamming had disrupted almost all their communication channels. The usual protocols felt useless against this invisible menace. Elena's voice, however, had to cut through the static and uncertainty. She cleared her throat and activated the emergency frequency, an open channel monitored by all military aircraft in the region. "This is Shadow Vixen. Mayday. Mayday. Unidentified hostile aircraft tracking and jamming our systems at 30,000 feet. Request immediate air support. Coordinates redacted. Repeat, immediate air support required. Over." The words were spoken with precision and calm, but inside, Elena felt a surge of adrenaline and fear. Mayday calls were rare for cargo pilots, almost unheard of, and to broadcast one on an open frequency was even riskier. But the situation left her no choice. The safety of her crew and aircraft depended on it. The silence that followed felt endless. The radio hissed with static, but no immediate response came. Elena glanced at Marcus, whose face mirrored her tension, but was resolute. The loadmaster stared ahead, eyes sharp and watchful. Then, a crackling voice broke through the noise. "Shadow Vixen, this is Falcon 1. We read you. F-22 Raptors are scrambled and en route. ETA 5 minutes. Hold your position." Relief washed over Elena, but it was tempered by urgency. 5 minutes could feel like a lifetime when shadowed by an unknown threat. "Copy, Falcon 1, Elena replied, holding steady, preparing for intercept. She flipped switches to stabilize what little communication remained with the base and updated the crew. "Support is coming. Stay alert and ready for anything." Her voice was steady, but inside her mind raced. What kind of enemy did they face? How far would they push their attack before the Raptors arrived? Could they survive until then? Elena thought back to her training, countless hours simulating emergencies and threats. But nothing quite prepared her for this moment. Alone, outgunned, responsible for dozens of lives on board. Outside, the unknown aircraft maneuvered aggressively, shadowing the C-17's every move. It was as if it was daring her to panic, to make a mistake. Elena kept her cool. She knew panic would mean disaster. Then, a sudden jolt shook the plane, subtle but undeniable. The unknown craft had fired a warning shot, an aggressive maneuver to force the cargo plane off course. The crew gasped. Elena's knuckles whitened on the yoke. "Steady," she commanded. "Maintain course." The tension in the cockpit was palpable. The loadmaster's hands clenched the seat rails, while Marcus kept scanning the radar for any changes. The seconds stretched, measured by Elena's controlled breathing. Then, distant thunder filled the radio, the unmistakable sound of F-22 engines ripping through the sky. Elena's heart pounded. The Raptors were closing in. She watched on the radar as two sleek dots sped toward them with terrifying speed. Falcon 1's voice came through again, this time clearer. "Shadow Vixen, Raptors inbound. Maintain course and altitude. We'll handle the hostile." Elena nodded to herself. The weight on her shoulders lessened just a bit. The unknown aircraft seemed to sense the shift too. It pulled back slightly, repositioning to assess the approaching jets. Elena took a breath and focused on flying. Every instrument, every readout was now a lifeline. The Raptors appeared on the horizon like shadows unleashed, elegant, deadly, the pinnacle of aerial combat technology. Elena marveled briefly at their speed and precision, then refocused. The lead Raptor pilot radioed in a low, commanding tone. "Shadow Vixen, this is Falcon Lead. We're taking over. Maintain steady flight." "We're here." "Roger that," Elena responded, grateful for the backup. The Raptors immediately began tactical maneuvers, weaving through the sky to intercept the hostile. Elena watched as the unknown craft darted and weaved, trying to evade the Raptors' precision. The aerial dance was a display of power and skill, the Raptors' dominance against a shadowy threat. Inside the cockpit, Elena's focus never wavered. She kept the plane steady, minimized turbulence for the cargo, and monitored every move. Suddenly, an alert blared. Another jolt shook the aircraft. "This is no longer a test," Marcus said grimly. "They're trying to provoke a reaction." Elena's mind flashed to the bigger picture. If the hostile wanted a fight, they wouldn't get it from her crew. Her voice was firm. "We're not engaging. We fly straight and steady." Outside, the Raptors closed the gap. Elena's breath caught as one Raptor came dangerously close to the unknown aircraft, signaling with bright lights and radio calls. The tension was electric. The unknown craft veered sharply and accelerated, heading away at top speed. Falcon Lead's voice came crisp over the radio. "Target retreating. Shadow Vixen, you're clear. We'll escort you the rest of the way." Relief flooded through the cockpit. Elena exhaled slowly, the first real release of tension in hours. "Thank you, Falcon Lead," she said softly. "You saved us." "Just doing our job," came the reply. The Raptors flanked the C-17, scanning the skies and maintaining a protective barrier. Elena looked at her crew. They were shaken but safe. She smiled faintly, knowing the crisis wasn't over, but they'd survived the worst. Her Mayday call had been heard. Her courage had sparked a rescue that few expected, the unlikely cargo pilot commanding fighter jets. And far beyond the clouds, the world held its breath, unaware of the quiet heroism playing out in the skies above. As the two F-22 Raptors surged through the sky toward the distressed C-17, far below, Captain Elena Ramirez maintained a steady hand and unwavering focus. But little did she know, her Shadow Vixen call sign was more than just an identifier. It carried a legacy few outside the elite air combat circles remembered. Years before, Elena had been a rising star in joint training exercises between cargo and fighter pilots. While cargo missions rarely intersected with combat drills, those rare encounters had made her stand out. Calm, precise, and fearless, she had earned respect from fighter pilots and commanders alike. Shadow Vixen wasn't just a radio handle, it was a symbol of a pilot who could operate in the gray zone between support and combat, bridging worlds few dared to cross. As the command center buzzed with activity, radar operators and commanders recognized the urgency. Elena's distress signal was unusual. Cargo pilots rarely called for air combat support. But when the call sign, Shadow Vixen, came through, seasoned officers exchanged knowing glances. Colonel James Hunter, a veteran Air Combat Command officer, leaned forward over his console. "That's Ramirez. She's the one who kept her cool during those joint ops with the fighters, remember? The pilot who handled that emergency cargo drop in the Aleutians like a pro." His deputy nodded. "If she's calling Mayday, it's serious. Scramble Raptors immediately." Within minutes, two F-22 Raptors were airborne. Their pilots briefed not only on the situation, but on the history of the pilot they were racing to protect. Elena's calm and skill were legendary among those who had flown with or trained alongside her. The first Raptor pilot, call sign Falcon Lead, was a seasoned veteran named Major Ryan Black. He remembered Elena well from joint exercises. "She's cool under fire," he had said once. "A cargo pilot? Maybe, but she flies like a fighter." As the Raptors streaked through the clouds, the pilots listened closely to Elena's transmissions. Her voice was steady despite the danger, a beacon of confidence amid chaos. Meanwhile, Elena focused on keeping her massive aircraft steady, mindful that the Raptors would soon take the fight to the unknown attacker. She glanced briefly at the radar. A hostile aircraft was still circling, probing for weaknesses. The commanders in the control room monitored every heartbeat of the engagement. For them, this was more than just a rescue mission. It was a test of their systems, their pilots, and their protocols. Back in the cockpit, Elena felt a mixture of relief and resolve. The arrival of the Raptors was a lifeline, but the battle was far from over. The Raptors closed the distance swiftly, their sleek forms cutting through the sky like shadows. The unknown aircraft reacted instantly, darting and weaving in an attempt to evade interception. Major Black's voice crackled through Elena's radio, steady and commanding. "Shadow Vixen, Falcons are on station. Maintain course and altitude. We're engaging the threat." Elena nodded, though the pilots on the other end couldn't see her. "Roger that," Falcon led, holding steady. The tension escalated as the Raptors approached the hostile aircraft, their presence a clear warning. The unknown pilot was skilled, but the Raptors' advanced radar and weaponry gave them an edge. In the cockpit of Falcon Lead's jet, Major Black tracked the target. "It's trying to shake us, but no luck. Let's push it back." Back in the C-17, Elena's heart pounded with adrenaline and hope. This was what she had trained for. The skies were a battlefield, and she was no longer just a cargo pilot. She was a protector. Suddenly, a sharp jolt rocked the plane as the hostile craft made a daring move, firing an electronic pulse aimed at the Raptor systems. The Raptors shuddered, but held formation. "Shadow Vixen, maintain steady flight," Major Black ordered. "We've got this." Elena responded calmly, her voice firm. "Holding. Keep the skies safe." The aerial battle that followed was intense and complex. High-stakes game of cat and mouse played out miles above the clouds. The Raptors used every tactic, every bit of advanced technology to corner and force the hostile craft away. In the command center, the mood was tense but hopeful. Elena's call had set off a rapid, coordinated response that few expected from a cargo pilot. Meanwhile, Elena's story was quietly becoming legend. The pilot who wasn't supposed to be in the fight had summoned America's most elite fighters with nothing but her courage and a Mayday call. As the hostile craft finally broke off and retreated, the Raptors escorted the C-17 to safer airspace. Elena exhaled, the weight of the moment settling over her. For those who knew her, Shadow Vixen was no longer just a call sign. It was a name whispered with respect, a reminder that heroes often emerge from the most unexpected places. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the vast Pacific, Elena Ramirez prepared for the quiet landing ahead, knowing that today she had changed the sky forever. The distant roar grew louder, a thunderous sound cutting through the otherwise tranquil blue skies. Captain Elena Ramirez barely dared to breathe as two sleek silhouettes emerged on the horizon F-22 Raptors, the United States Air Force's most advanced fighter jets, arriving with breathtaking speed and precision. Elena's heart thumped in her chest, pounding like the engines that filled the cockpit with their raw power. These were not just aircraft. They were symbols of American air superiority, capable of turning the tide in any aerial conflict. And now they had come to her rescue. Falcon 1 and Falcon 2 inbound, came the voice of Major Ryan Black, call sign Falcon Lead, steady and authoritative over the radio. "Shadow Vixen, we have visual. Maintain your course." Elena acknowledged the call, keeping her eyes trained on the radar and the skies. The Raptors moved with coordinated grace, weaving their way through wisps of cloud, closing the gap with the unknown aircraft that had shadowed her cargo plane for hours. She glanced at her co-pilot, Marcus Chun, whose usually calm demeanor was now tinged with nervous excitement. The entire crew knew this was no ordinary escort mission. The Raptors would engage the hostile threat, and Elena and her team would be safe. The unknown aircraft suddenly shifted tactics, darting toward the approaching fighters with alarming agility. The dance of machines in the sky had become a deadly game of chess, each move calculated, each moment fraught with danger. Major Black's voice came again, calm and precise. Falcon 2, take position on the enemy's left. Falcon 1, I'm engaging from the right. Elena held her breath as the Raptors closed in on the hostile craft. The threat that had seemed invisible, intangible just minutes ago, now faced the raw power and cutting-edge technology of America's best pilots. Inside Falcon Lead's cockpit, Major Black's focus was razor-sharp. The unknown aircraft was nimble, but it was no match for the Raptor's stealth, speed, and weaponry. With a sudden burst of acceleration, Falcon 1 locked its radar and prepared to engage. Electronic warfare countermeasures lit up the display. The hostile was no amateur. Elena watched, transfixed, as a brilliant streak of light flashed across the sky, a missile launched by Falcon 1. The hostile craft executed evasive maneuvers, narrowly avoiding the strike. But the Raptors weren't done. Falcon 2 closed in, lasers guiding another missile through the air. This time, the hostile aircraft was hit, its movements erratic. Elena, this is Falcon Lead. Target disabled, but still hostile. We're moving to secure the area, Major Black reported. Elena exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly. Her voice over the radio was calm, but firm. Copy, Falcon Lead, thank you. The Raptors formed a protective shield around the lumbering C-17. As it continued its course toward Guam, Elena kept a steady hand on the controls, knowing every second counted. The skies, which had seemed vast and empty just hours before, now brimmed with life and danger. Back in the command center, the mood was one of cautious optimism. Elena's Mayday call had triggered a swift and decisive response, a testament to the coordination and readiness of the U.S. Air Force. Colonel Hunter allowed himself a brief smile. Ramirez earned every bit of that call sign, he muttered. Shadow Vixen indeed. Elena's thoughts drifted momentarily to the cargo below, supplies vital to missions overseas. Humanitarian aid and equipment that could mean the difference between life and death for soldiers and civilians alike. She thought of the people depending on her and how close they had come to losing it all. The Raptors maintained their tight formation as the hostile aircraft, now crippled, veered away and disappeared into the horizon. Elena felt a surge of gratitude and awe for the pilots who had come to their aid. Falcon led, you've got a guardian angel, she whispered into the mic. Just doing our job, Captain, came the reply, laced with respect. As the C-17 descended toward Anderson Air Force Base, the crew began preparations for landing. The tension that had gripped them all day began to dissipate, replaced by exhaustion and relief. Elena allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had been just a cargo pilot, an unsung hero in the vast machinery of the military. But today, she had become so much more. Her courage, her voice, and her steady hand had summoned the very best the Air Force had to offer. She had faced the unknown, stared down danger, and called for help in a way that few cargo pilots ever imagined. And the Raptors had answered. The plane touched down smoothly at Anderson Air Force Base, greeted by emergency crews and high-ranking officers, eager to debrief the pilot who had captured the attention of the entire military command. Elena stepped out of the cockpit, her eyes tired but shining with quiet pride. Reporters and cameras waited, eager for the story of the cargo pilot who had triggered an aerial showdown. But Elena deflected the spotlight. This was a team effort, she said simply. The crew, the command center, the Raptors. Everyone did their part. Behind her, the Raptors taxied in, their pilots sharing a quiet nod of respect. That day, the skies over the Pacific had witnessed an extraordinary convergence, a cargo pilot who refused to be invisible, and fighter pilots who soared to her call. The story of Shadow Vixen spread through the ranks, a powerful reminder that courage and skill could come from anywhere, and that sometimes the loudest call for help was from the quietest voice. The engine's roar faded to a distant murmur as Captain Elena Ramirez guided the C-17 safely onto the tarmac at Anderson Air Force Base. The enormous cargo plane, so often a symbol of steady, dependable logistics, now carried a story of unexpected heroism and peril that would echo throughout the military for years to come. As the aircraft taxied to a stop, the crew exhaled collectively, some with relief, others with a residual adrenaline-fueled energy. The tension that had gripped them since the initial sighting of the unknown aircraft began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced down a threat no cargo pilot was expected to encounter and lived to tell the tale. Elena's legs felt weak as she climbed down the steps from the cockpit. The day's stress and exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but there was no time for rest. Waiting on the tarmac were senior officers, emergency personnel, and a growing crowd of curious onlookers, reporters eager for the story behind the now famous call sign, Shadow Vixen. Captain Ramirez, a voice called out. It was Colonel James Hunter, the Air Combat Command officer who had overseen the entire operation from the command center. His usually stern face softened with a mix of respect and relief. Welcome back. You did a remarkable job out there. Elena nodded, attempting a modest smile. Thank you, sir. I just did what I had to. The phrase was humble, but in her heart, she knew the weight of the day's events. The Mayday call that had echoed through the skies. The arrival of the F-22 Raptors. The high-stakes aerial confrontation, all moments that had tested her limits and revealed a strength she hadn't fully realized she possessed. Inside the debriefing room, the crew sat together, replaying the events in meticulous detail. Elena's calm leadership had been the linchpin. Without her composed decision to issue the Mayday call, without her steadiness at the controls, the outcome could have been far different. The command staff praised the crew's professionalism, but the real attention was on Elena, a cargo pilot who had stepped beyond her typical role to become a beacon of hope and courage in the sky. Captain, Colonel Hunter said during the debrief, your call saved lives today. It triggered a rapid response that prevented what could have been a catastrophic incident. You demonstrated exceptional situational awareness and composure under pressure. Elena listened carefully, the weight of his words sinking in. She remembered the moment she keyed the mic to send that desperate Mayday, the feeling of isolation and uncertainty. At that time, she had no way of knowing if anyone would hear her, or if help would arrive in time. She thought of her crew, the cargo, and the unknown hostile aircraft lurking just beyond the clouds. The risks had been immense. Yet now, here she was recognized, validated, a quiet hero. Outside the room, reporters clamored for interviews. Cameras flashed as Elena answered questions with grace and humility. She deflected praise toward the team and the fighter pilots who had come to their aid. But privately, the experience left her with deep reflections. What if the hostile aircraft had not withdrawn? What if the communication systems had failed entirely? What did this encounter say about the evolving threats in the world's skies? In the days that followed, Elena found herself revisiting those questions. Military analysts pored over the radar data and communication logs. Commanders debated how to improve detection and response protocols to prevent similar incidents. Elena was invited to briefings, sharing her first-hand perspective on the challenges of flying a cargo aircraft in a potentially hostile environment. She realized the incident had opened a doorway that connected the often overlooked world of cargo operations with the cutting-edge realm of aerial combat and defense strategy. Her call sign, Shadow Vixen, had become a symbol of that connection, a reminder that every pilot, regardless of their aircraft's role, must be prepared to face the unexpected. Elena's family, once proud of her steady career as a cargo pilot, now saw her in a new light. Her younger brother called her his hero, and her parents marveled at her courage. But Elena remained grounded, focusing on what mattered most, the safety of her crew and the mission ahead. The military recognized her contributions with commendations and honors. But Elena knew her real achievement was the bond forged between cargo pilots and combat forces, bond that would strengthen future missions. One quiet evening, alone in her quarters, Elena stared out the window at the vast Pacific horizon. The sky was peaceful now, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the previous days. She thought about the unknown aircraft, now just a memory etched into radar logs and reports. Who piloted it? What were their motives? Questions that might never be answered fully. But one thing was clear: the skies had changed. And so had she. Captain Elena Ramirez, once just a cargo pilot, had become a symbol of resilience and courage, a guardian of the sky in her own right. She knew that the next time the call came, whether from a fighter pilot or a cargo crew, she would be ready. Because in the vast expanse above, every voice mattered. And sometimes, the quietest calls echoed the loudest. In the weeks following the tense aerial encounter over the Pacific, Captain Elena Ramirez found herself thrust into a spotlight she had never sought. Known until now as a reliable cargo pilot operating quietly behind the scenes, she was suddenly the focus of a national story, a symbol of calm under fire and unexpected bravery. The media dubbed her the silent hero, a nod to the unseen but vital role cargo pilots play in the broader military mission. Reporters sought interviews, documentary crews requested footage, and military leaders invited her to speak at prestigious events. Yet, through it all, Elena remained remarkably humble. "I'm just doing my job," she often repeated, brushing aside accolades. But those who knew her well recognized something more, a quiet strength born from years of dedication, training, and an unshakable commitment to those under her care. The official recognition came in the form of commendations and awards. At a ceremony held at Andrews Air Force Base, Colonel James Hunter presented her with the Air Medal for Heroism. The room was packed with military brass, fellow pilots, and crew members, all standing in respectful silence as her achievements were recounted. Captain Ramirez's decisive action and unwavering composure under threat exemplify the highest standards of service, Colonel Hunter said, his voice resonating through the hall. Her courage not only saved lives, but also strengthened the bonds between cargo and combat aviation. Elena accepted the medal with quiet dignity, her eyes scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Marcus Chun, her co-pilot, and the loadmaster stood proudly nearby, their smiles radiant. Later, as she walked through the halls of the Air Force, Elena reflected on how far she had come. Just months ago, she had been a pilot content with a steady rhythm of cargo runs and routine flights. Now, she was a symbol, a reminder that heroism could come from unexpected places. With newfound recognition came new opportunities. Elena was invited to join elite training programs designed to better prepare cargo crews for hostile environments. She became a liaison between logistics and combat units, bridging gaps in communication and tactics. The military recognized the importance of her experience and insights. Elena's unique perspective on operating a cargo plane under threat made her an invaluable asset in refining protocols and training. But the transformation wasn't just professional. It was personal. Elena found herself reevaluating her goals and ambitions. The experience of calling for help and seeing the Raptor's answer had awakened a deeper passion, not just to ferry supplies, but to actively participate in the defense of the skies. With careful consideration, she applied for a transfer to a new program focused on integrating cargo pilots into more tactical roles. A program aimed to equip pilots with advanced skills, including evasive maneuvers, electronic warfare awareness, and joint mission planning alongside fighter units. The transition was challenging but exhilarating. Elena immersed herself in rigorous training, expanding her knowledge and honing new skills. She worked closely with fighter pilots like Major Black, developing mutual respect and camaraderie. Shadow Vixen, Major Black joked during a joint exercise. "You're not just a cargo pilot anymore, you're one of us." Elena laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as she embraced her evolving role. Meanwhile, the military took steps to improve the safety and security of cargo missions worldwide. Elena's incident sparked a review of protocols, leading to enhanced communication systems, better threat detection, and more frequent joint training exercises between cargo and combat crews. Her voice in these discussions was influential. She advocated for cargo crews to be trained, not just in flying, but in situational awareness and threat response. "I want every pilot out there to feel prepared," she said during a strategy session. "We can't be silent anymore." Her words resonated deeply within the military community. Slowly but surely, the perception of cargo pilots shifted from support personnel to essential players in a complex, dangerous aerial theater. Outside the military, Elena's story inspired countless young people, especially women considering aviation careers. She became a role model, attending schools and events to share her journey, emphasizing resilience, courage, and the power of a single call for help. Her message was simple yet profound. You don't have to be a fighter pilot to be a hero. Sometimes, it's the quiet voices that make the loudest impact. At home, the changes were just as significant. Elena's family celebrated her achievements with pride, while her close friends admired her newfound confidence and determination. Yet, despite the accolades and new responsibilities, Elena remained grounded. She still loved flying the C-17, the plane that had carried her through so many missions, and the crew who had become her second family. One evening, as she prepared for another flight, Elena stood on the tarmac, looking up at the stars. The sky was vast and full of possibilities, a reminder of both challenges and hope. She thought of the Raptors, soaring high and fast, guardians of the airspace. She thought of the unknown aircraft, now a fading memory, but a catalyst for change. And she thought of herself, not just as a cargo pilot, but as a guardian in her own right. Ready for the next mission, she whispered to herself. Because the sky was no longer just a place she flew through. It was a stage where courage, skill, and quiet strength converged. And Captain Elena Ramirez was ready for whatever came next. Years after that fateful day over the vast Pacific, the story of Captain Elena Ramirez, the cargo pilot who called Mayday and summoned the formidable F-22 Raptors, had become more than a military legend. It had grown into a legacy that reshaped how the United States Air Force viewed its pilots, its missions, and the very skies above. Elena sat in the conference room at a newly established Air Force training center dedicated to joint operations between cargo and combat units. The walls were adorned with photos and quotes from pilots and crew members who had played critical roles in evolving air defense strategy. At the center hung a large framed image of a C-17 soaring alongside two F-22 Raptors, symbolizing the unity between support and combat forces. Beneath the picture, a plaque read simply, "In honor of Captain Elena Ramirez, Shadow Vixen." She ran her fingers lightly over the plaque, a faint smile touching her lips. Her journey had come full circle, from a steady, dependable cargo pilot flying routine missions to a figure inspiring new generations to redefine what it meant to serve in the skies. Captain Ramirez, called Lieutenant Marcus Chun, now a seasoned pilot in his own right, walking in with a folder in hand. The next class is ready for your keynote." Elena took a deep breath and nodded. She stood and made her way toward the training auditorium, her posture steady and confident. Today, she would share not only the story of her own experience, but the lessons learned, the changes made, and the future ahead. Inside the auditorium, dozens of pilots and crew members, both new and experienced, gathered eagerly. Among them were cargo pilots, fighter pilots, navigators, and communications specialists, representatives of a new era of integrated aerial defense. Elena began with a recounting of that harrowing day, the unexpected sighting of the hostile aircraft, the rising tension as she maneuvered the C-17, and the desperate Mayday call that would change everything. She spoke honestly about fear, uncertainty, and the burden of responsibility. "I was just a cargo pilot," she said, "but when I realized we were under threat, I knew I had to act. That moment taught me that courage isn't about rank or title, it's about doing what's right when it matters most." Her voice grew stronger as she described the arrival of the Raptors, the skilled pilots who answered her call, and the power of teamwork and trust in the skies. "But beyond the battle," she continued, "the real victory was the change that followed, the recognition that every pilot, every crew member, has a role in defending our skies. We're no longer isolated specialties. We are part of a unified mission." She emphasized the ongoing importance of training, communication, and readiness. Threats evolve, and so must we. That means breaking down barriers, sharing knowledge, and being prepared to face the unexpected together. The room was silent, every listener captivated by her words. Elena looked out at the faces, young, eager, sometimes uncertain, but full of potential. After the presentation, she mingled with the trainees, answering questions and offering guidance. Many expressed admiration and gratitude for the path she had paved. One young cargo pilot asked, "How do you handle the pressure when things get dangerous?" Elena smiled warmly. "You focus on your training, your crew, and your mission. And you remember that you're never truly alone up there. Help is just a call away if you have the courage to make it." The legacy of Shadow Vixen had become a beacon, encouraging pilots across all roles to embrace responsibility and courage. Back at the base, Elena was part of ongoing initiatives aimed at improving air defense integration. She worked alongside engineers, developing new communication systems that linked cargo planes directly with fighter jets, enabling real-time coordination during missions. Her input was invaluable. Having experienced firsthand the vulnerability and strength of cargo operations under threat, she helped shape technology and protocols that made every mission safer. Beyond the military, Elena's story continued to inspire. She had been invited to speak at schools, aviation conferences, and women's leadership forums. Her journey from a quiet pilot to a national hero resonated with audiences everywhere. In one memorable speech, she told a crowd of young women, "You don't have to be the loudest voice or the fastest flyer to make a difference. Sometimes, the most powerful impact comes from knowing when to speak up and having the courage to be heard." Her message transcended the military, reaching hearts and minds across the country. At home, Elena cherished the quiet moments with her family and friends, grounding herself amid the whirlwind of attention. She continued flying missions, now part of a specialized unit, tasked with operating in contested airspace alongside combat forces. Her co-pilot, Marcus, was now a close friend and trusted partner. Together, they navigated a new Chapter 1, filled with challenges and opportunities. One clear night, after a successful mission, Elena stood outside the hangar and gazed at the stars. The vast sky stretched endlessly above, a canvas of possibility and promise. She thought about the unknown aircraft from years ago, the shadow that had tested her limits and awakened her potential. It was a reminder that the skies would always hold surprises, dangers, and opportunities. But she also knew this: The legacy she helped create, the legacy of the Shadow Vixen, was a force for strength and unity. It was a call for every pilot, every crew member, to rise to their best selves. The future of aerial defense was not just about advanced technology or powerful jets. It was about people courageous, skilled, and ready to answer the call. Elena Ramirez smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just a cargo pilot, nor just a hero of a single day. She was part of something bigger, a new era, where every voice mattered, every role was vital, and the sky was shared by guardians of all kinds. And as she looked to the horizon, she knew that the story of the Shadow Vixen was just beginning. The end,